Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to install a cold air intake system from S&B Filters on the 2022 and up Ford Maverick with the 2.0 EcoBoost. Now this is also going to be the same install for the Bronco Sport and Escape with a 2-liter EcoBoost. The tools I'll be using for this installation are a ratchet with a 3-inch extension along with some sockets. I've got a 7mm, 8, 10, 11, and 13mm. Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead precision screwdriver, fastener removal tool, a 5mm Allen wrench, 19mm wrench, channel locks, and a 5/8 quick disconnect tool. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the first thing we need to do is disconnect our negative battery terminal. We're going to do that with a 10mm socket. You want to make sure you leave it disconnected for at least 2 hours. That's going to allow our computer to reset. You want to do that. If you do not leave it disconnected for at least 2 hours, you run a strong risk of pulling a check engine light once the new system is hooked up and turned back on. So let's go ahead and pull that off now. All right, I'm going to throw a rag in between there just so it does not reconnect. Now we can go on to the next step. This is our factory scoop that hooks up right behind the grill. This needs to come off next. What we're going to do, we'll notice we've got 2 plastic push pins that come down through here. We're going to pop both of those off with a fastener removal tool and then just pull this straight out. The way these pins work is you pop the top first and then pop the bottom out like so. All right, now we need to go ahead and remove our factory air box. In order to do that, we first need to take loose this tube. So we're going to loosen up this band clamp using a 7mm. Once that's nice and loose, you'll notice we've got a little peg and notch right here. We're going to slide that over where it rotates like so. That way this will come off nice and easy. Next, we're going to go ahead. This is our inlet air temperature sensor. We're going to disconnect that. What you want to do is push in on this spot right here and it slides right off. Then we've got a fastener removal tool to pry it off of this point here. And then we've got a clip down here that needs to come loose. And then let this hang out of the way. Now what we can do is go ahead and start pulling straight up on the factory air box and pull it loose. We've got some grommets down below that are holding it in place. We're going to make sure none of those come loose, and if they do, we're going to pop them right back into place. Ours did not, so we've got all 3 grommets still in place. All right, now we're going to follow the factory intake tube up to these 2 studs that are coming out. We've got 10mm nuts that are down here. We need to remove those using our 10mm deep well socket. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and disconnect this tube from our intake tube. What we're going to do is squeeze these 2 tabs together and that pushes this up. Then we can just pull this straight off. Now we can kind of set that off to the side. Now for this tube, what we're going to do is pull up on that tab here. Now we can push down on this tab and that one will pull off. The following tube, we've got 2 tabs on this side here. Squeeze in on those and that one comes off. And now we're going to need a specialty tool for this tube here. So before we get to that, I'm going to go ahead and get this wiring out of the way. So I'm going to disconnect this plug and pull it off of this line. Now we can get a tool into here. Okay, now this is a 5/8 quick disconnect tool. If you're not familiar with these, they make these for fuel and AC lines. And that's going to be used for this crankcase ventilation tube. So what we're going to do, if you notice, we got kind of a little notch right here. We're going to kind of squeeze it into this location, spread it around that notch. When it comes back around, we're going to slide it into the connector. Once it's slid into the connector, you can disconnect it and pull your tool loose. All right, now before we finish pulling the factory intake tube out, we want to first come back here to the back side of the tube. We're going to have a hose that plugs into the tube. What we're going to do is use a channel lock to squeeze this clamp together and pull this off of the tube. There we go. All right, now that we have the rubber hose pulled off the intake tube on the back side, we can come back over the other side and remove the final nut from this bracket, also using a 10mm. And we can lift the bracket up and get all that out of the way. All right, next we're going to be removing these two studs, but in order to do that, I want to give you guys a better view. So you don't have to do what I'm about to do, but I am going to get this out of the way. So I'm just going to squeeze this and pull this apart. I'm just going to set this out of the way. Now I can go ahead and pull out both of these studs using a 13mm. All right, now we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to this hose clamp here. Loosen that up with a 7mm just like we did the others. All right, and just like with the other band clamp, once this is loosened up, you can wiggle it around. Make sure that this opening goes over top of that notch. So we're going to rotate that over. And now we can go ahead and pull out our factory intake tube and set it out to the side. All right, now this is our elbow tube that goes down to the turbo. This needs to come out next. So I'm not going to be able to show you exactly where it connects to the turbo because how tight this situation is. But what we're going to do is show you the piece that replaces it. So basically, this is the top and this is the top. If we follow down to the bottom, this tube is going to have a tube that comes off of it with a band clamp. The nut on the band clamp is going to be facing towards the firewall, so we're going to put our 7mm socket on there and loosen that up. Once that's loosened up, we can pull it off of the turbo and out of the engine compartment. All right, there we go. That's the band clamp we were looking at. Okay, now on the factory air box, we're still going to have the intake air temperature sensor that needs to come out to go into our new system. Now, I do want to point out there's a little tab right here that needs to come up and go over top of this little ramp. It does need to turn counterclockwise before it can come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little precision screwdriver, fit it up underneath there, and gently pry up on that tab. And then we can rotate it out. We're going to set that to the side so we can use it later. All right, now I want to point out the grommets on the factory air tube. Those need to come out as well. The way those come out, what we're going to do is kind of push up on the bottom of it, and the metal will kind of separate out. We'll set that to the side, and also the grommet itself. We'll pop that out and do that on both of them. Okay, so now here is our new intake tube. I'm going to assemble everything together on here. I'm going to start from this side and work my way over. So the first place we're going to stop is where our intake temperature sensor is going to come over. Now that we've got the factory intake temperature sensor, it's going to drop into here. Before we can put that in there, we've got a grommet. Now if you look at this, this is shaped just the same as the top of the grommet, so just make sure the grommet lines up. And there you go. Now you'll also notice there's a little bit of a ramp right here, just like on the factory, it had a ramp. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our intake temperature sensor and we're going to insert it down to there and then turn this to where we go over top of the ramp and make sure that this is butted up against the ramp. Now we're going to go ahead and move to this location. We've got some quick disconnect tubes. What we're going to do is take and install one, just finger tight for right now. All right, once we get that in there hand tight, we're going to take a 19mm wrench and just get it nice and snug. We do not need to over tighten this. And there will be threads still sticking out. Next, we're going to move to our dual inlet, and it's got a foam gasket goes along with it. Make sure the gasket is lined up properly to our intake. and then it's going to line up to the 4 holes. So it only is going to line up one way. Once you get that lined up, you're going to take the provided screws. We're going to put a drop of the included blue thread lock on each one of these. As we run them in, we're going to tighten them down with a Phillips head screwdriver. Don't over tighten these. Now we're going to go ahead and move to our next quick disconnect tube. And it's going to install the exact same way as the first one. So just thread it in hand tight first, and then snug it up with a 19mm. Again, do not over tighten that, and there will be threads showing underneath. And now we've got these brackets here. They're going to line up to these threaded holes. We've got a bracket with the 2 holes down here. It's going to be facing towards the bottom. And then this bracket is going to have this piece facing this direction and also facing towards the top. Again, we're going to do a little bit of thread locker on each of these bolts. And we're going to be able to snug those up with a 5mm Allen head wrench. All right, and lastly down the end, we're going to take one of our silicone couplers, and it's going to be the one fitted to this end. Make sure it's nice and lined up to the groove that we've got here. And then we're going to go ahead and take one of our band clamps and slide it over this location here, and then snug it up. Again, you don't need to over tighten this. Just get it nice and snug. All right, let's go ahead and move to our scoop. Okay, so here is our new scoop. Now this is the top side of the scoop. On the bottom, it looks like this. So that's the orientation. When we flip this around, you're gonna notice we got a couple of built-in threaded inserts that are in here. That's for our brackets that are gonna hold that up to our radiator housing. So what we're gonna do, this is the bracket. The top side of the bracket is here with a hole that needs to be aligned like so. We got one on each side. So what we're going to do is use our included thread locker and included washers and Allen head bolts. Do a little dab of thread locker on each one of the bolts. All right, and we're going to snug this down with a 5mm Allen wrench, but there is some wiggle room on there, and so you may have to adjust this slightly when it actually gets in place to get the front edge lined up properly. And repeat the same on this side over here. All right, now this is the part of our scoop that is going to be plugging into the air box. Is going to come with a silicone gasket. Now, the gasket has got kind of a thicker side on one side and then not as thick on the other side. The thicker side goes towards the scoop. Now, there's a little bit of a trick to this to get everything to go together well. Don't put this on all the way just yet. What we're going to do is just kind of get it stretched over top of the opening. Get it about right there, because this is going to be a really tight fit when it goes in. And if this is all the way in, it's going to be a lot more difficult to plug it into the air box. All right, so here is our new air box. This is the opening that our scoop is going to plug into. We're not going to plug in the scoop just yet. First, what we want to do is put our large grommet where our intake tube is going to push into it. So here is the large grommet. It goes into this hole. We're just going to line it up and fit it in place. All right, there we go. We've also got a lid that's going to go on here. I'm going to show you how to assemble that, but we are not going to install the lid just yet. So let's go ahead and plug in our scoop into this opening here. We're going to go ahead and fit this into the air box before we shove it all in place. push it all the way in. All right, now we're going to go ahead and set this to the side while I assemble the airbox lid. All right, now when assembling the airbox lid, make sure you go ahead and pull off the protective film on both sides of the S&B lid. Also, S&B should be facing out. Go ahead and line that up to where it's going to match the contours of the lid and get that slid into place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and set that to the side. All right, now we can go ahead and put together our smaller intake tube. Down here at the bottom, this is where it goes to the turbo. This is a smaller opening, larger opening goes to the large intake tube. We're going to go ahead and take our coupler and slide it over. Make sure it goes all the way to this ridge right here. And then we're going to go ahead and take one of our band clamps. Now, I'm going to be a little bit strategic with this. When this goes back in place where the turbo is, it's going to be very difficult to get to. Is, you know, you're not going to be able to see it at all with a camera, and I'm going to have to get, squeeze my fingers in there to get to this band clamp over here. So I don't want to confuse this band clamp with this band clamp when I'm tightening this in very tight conditions. So because this side over here is where the firewall is, I'm going to have to come from this way to tighten it down. So I'm going to have this band clamp facing that way so I don't accidentally try to tighten this one while I'm going for this one here. So let me go ahead and tighten this down with an 8mm. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and take this band clamp, because once it's down at the turbo, again, I'll be coming down here and tightening from this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and get it where it's just snug on there. I don't want to tighten it at all because I don't want to make this diameter smaller, because whenever this goes over top of the flange of the turbo, it's got to kind of stretch a little bit. So I'm just going to get it to where it just barely touches so I don't have as much to do whenever I get down there. All right, let's go ahead and set that to the side. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and connect the small tube to the turbo and get that part out of the way, because then that way everything will be downhill at this point, just because this is the tightest part of the install. Make sure when you're slipping that over the turbo inlet that you get it all the way onto the inlet. All right, I've got it nice and snugged up, and now I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down using that 8mm. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put our large air tube in place. Now, I do want to point out, this is going to be kind of a tight fit here as well, where we're going to be moving things around. So I did pull out the inlet air temperature sensor just so it doesn't get tweaked while we're doing all this. But basically what we're going to do is kind of turn the air tube like so it kind of fits down into this hole, and then just kind of rotate it as it goes through, and then drop it down like so. But we don't want it all the way in yet, because we also have to kind of marry this to the air box. So we're going to go ahead and bring the air box up, and this has got to kind of come up at an angle in order to meet the air box. And we're just going to lift it up and work it into place. There we go. And we can just kind of rotate this down. And that'll set it in place where it needs to be. What we want to do is keep that flange right there about even with our silicone gasket on our air box. All right, now we're going to go ahead and fit the scoop into the air box. Do this nice and gently so that we can get the silicone in place. And once that's in place, we can push it in and then drop it down. Now this, we also have to kind of wiggle around to get it to drop into place, but these holes need to line up to these holes here. All right, we went ahead and seated it down into the grommets, which basically drop this down to the radiator shroud. So we're going to go ahead and use our factory push pins and reinstall those here. All right, now we can go ahead and connect our rear tube and clamp. There we go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and attach our factory grommet assembly to our bracket. And as we're doing that, we're also going to plug our turbo into our coupler with the provided band clamp and do that kind of all together so it kind of draws everything together. So just go ahead and lift that up, fit the bushing in with the grommet. We'll take our band clamp, set that in place. Let's put the rest of this in. And our posts to get everything lined up. All right, we're using a 13 millimeter to tighten these posts down. And we'll use an 8 millimeter to tighten down the band clamp. And make sure the band clamp is nice and straight onto the silicone coupler. And make sure everything's all together. All right, now this bracket right here we removed before. We're going to go ahead and get this onto our new bracket. So we need to take this free from the factory bracket. So we're going to take a fastener removal tool and pop this off of here. And then as we slide this off of the factory bracket, make sure you take that rubber isolator off as well. And go ahead and put that over to our new bracket. And we're going to go ahead and set this on top of that isolator. Just slide it down into place, and we can go ahead and start reconnecting some of our hoses. I'm going to slide this over and get this nut on. This is the factory nut that we took off. Snug that up with a 10 millimeter. Got a deep well. Now we're going to go ahead and reconnect our electrical sensor back here and just start reconnecting hoses. Pushes into place and then push that down to connect it. All right, and we're going to go ahead and reconnect this over here. And this guy can snap onto here and lock in place. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall our inlet air temperature sensor. Okay, now our intake air temperature sensor harness plugs in from right here, but we've moved it, so they also give us a harness extension, so we can plug that in, bring that over here, plug it on this side, and now we can secure that with some wire ties. All right, now to install our new filter, what we're going to do is drop the top of the filter down in first, line it up with tube, and then once it's up to the flange, go ahead and tighten it down with the 8 millimeter. All right, now we can go ahead and pop our lid into place. And let's reconnect the battery. All right, and just to remind you, make sure it's been more than 2 hours since you disconnected the battery. You can just go ahead and reconnect it. Well, that concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online at RealTruck.com.